Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
I'm not alone. That's what our name means, unity. That there's only one life, one presence, one reality. It is God. And we are all part of that. Each of us is an individualized expression. So it's impossible for us to be alone because we are always part of everything. But in our thoughts, in our mind, we forget. And we act from our error thinking of separation and isolation. And that in itself is the explanation for evil. It's when people in the world have so forgotten who they are. And that pain is so great that they must inflict it outwardly. And that is not even the sermon today. That's just an extra bonus. So. I also forgot to mention, there is another thing. Some of you may notice our flags are missing. We have 14 flagpoles on Unity Drive, and right before Memorial Day weekend, we fly the American flag, and it's up through the weekend after July 4th. And this week we had some vandals. We had some people, they cut the ropes and stole 11 of our flags. And so I offered in the first service that if someone would like to be generous, in the summer people travel, our attendance is usually a little lighter, and sometimes our offering goes down to them. So it was a gentle request to remember us this summer that our budget doesn't decrease in the summer. And we had asked for you to be mindful of us as you're making your generous gifts. And we did already have someone in the church who said that they would cover the cost of those flags. But you could still be generous in other ways. So thank you. And as a matter of fact, we're calling generosity and giving one of our spiritual practices. We'll be exploring that on June 30th. And then the whole month of July, we're talking about prosperity. So a lot of good things happening here. So you don't want to go anywhere in the summer, I'm telling you. So we're talking about prayer today. I'm calling this talk Conscious Connection to God. What do we mean by that? There was a grandfather walking on the beach with his only grandson, and a rogue wave came on the beach and it swept his grandchild out to sea. And he raised his face to the sky. He said, God, please hear my prayer. Return my grandson to me. His father will not know what to do. His mother will be heartbroken. I will be heartbroken. Please, God, bring my grandson back. And another wave came on the shore and deposited his grandson right at his feet. He looked down, he turned back up, and he said, he was wearing a hat, God. That's funny, right? Thanks, Bobby. Grandparents, that would not be what happens, right? There are many kinds of prayer. Complaint is not one. What would be the proper response to something like that happening? Gratitude. Absolutely. Meister Eckhart was a 13th century Christian mystic, and he said, if the only prayer we ever pray in our whole life is thank you, it would be enough. Gratitude is a powerful prayer, but that's not the only prayer. We do a prayer of asking, of supplication, where we are asking God to grant us something. We do a prayer of atonement. We do a prayer of intercession. My mom is a little Pentecostal prayer warrior. She can pray for folks, let me tell you, with a prayer of faith and knowing. And in all of the world of spiritual practice, from all the faith traditions, which we honor all traditions here in Unity, our movement, called the New Thought Movement, created out of the transcendental philosophers in the middle of the last century, 2 centuries ago now, in the 19th century, and also the spiritual healing movement that was through Phineas Quimby and people like that. There was a movement was formed called New Thought. And it was discovered through ancient practices. This wasn't new. It's not new thought like it's a new spiritual tradition. Our teaching goes all the way back to the most ancient of philosophies and spiritual traditions. This truth has always been known, that our mind is the creative lens through which spirit pours itself. We can change our experience of reality with our thoughts. We can think a new thought and have a different reality. That's what New Thought means. Unity is the largest denomination in New Thought. And in those early days, they began to teach that you can pray not to the presence off there somewhere, but from the indwelling Christ mind. You can pray from the presence of God that is within you, that we are one with this presence, and we can speak with power and with faith and direct our intention into that part of God that is the listening, the receptive, the law, and we will have a manifestation, a demonstration of our truth. This was never before seen in the way that we brought it forth in its tradition. It's our singular contribution to the world of spiritual practice, affirmative prayer. And it works. I'm going to make a bold claim here, but I said it in the first service and lightning didn't strike me, so I think it's true. We don't believe in that kind of a God either. As a matter of fact, if you're new to Unity, you might be like trying to figure out what we're about here. I heard this in an interview once. He was actually I think it was a Unitarian Universalist minister who was on a plane, and the person next to him said, "What do you do?" And ministers, we're always not looking forward to that moment. And he said, "I'm a minister." And then that person next to him said, "I don't believe in God." And the minister responded, "Tell me about this God you don't believe in, because chances are I don't believe in him either." So whatever perception you have of a distant, judging, punishing God, that's not what we teach. Here in this church, we believe in the universal presence of divine love and intelligence that works through us to create its good into form in our lives. That's what we're about. And we have access to this power. And that's what this does. So the bold claim I was going to make is that this has been my primary spiritual practice for the last 25 years. Every single problem in my life I have brought into this practice of affirmative prayer. And here comes the bold claim part. Every one of these prayers has been answered. Every one. I'm bragging a little bit, aren't I? Yeah. A friend of mine, Ken Porter, after the first service, he said, "That's true. God answers one of three ways. Yes, not yet, I've got something better." And that is true. Not all of the prayers have been answered in exactly the time and the form that I thought. Like I wanted it done by Tuesday, and I wanted it in the blue box, please, with a receipt. And though it hasn't always been answered in that way, but there's always been something through this practice of bringing my need and turning that need into a knowing. Do you hear me? I love the song that Julia sang, and it was beautiful, very devotional. We don't get rid of this loving, devotional relationship with God. That's important. There's a teaching from the integral philosophy Ken Wilber created out of Boulder, and he says that there are three faces of God, and to be an integral spiritual being, we must be able to stand in all three, and they're the parts of speech. It's the I, the you, and the it. The it is the cosmic consciousness. All that is God. There is nothing except this life of God revealing itself. That's it, nothing else. That's the it. The you is the one that most of us in Western religions, this is what we know, that there is the Father God, the Mother God, the one that we talk to, pray to, that we are in relationship with, that I am not alone, you go before me. That's beautiful. It's right. And Wilber says, well, we go to the first one. The first one is the one we trouble with. It's the I. That I am an outlet point for divine consciousness. I wouldn't ever say it like I am God. What I would say is all that I am is God, but I'm not all that God is. Do you get the difference? But Wilber says that if we don't have that devotional, that loving, relational aspect of God, when we go from small mind to big mind in our spiritual consciousness, we can go from small ego to big ego. And I don't think there's anything more dangerous than a spiritualized ego, amen? Have you seen that? I certainly have. It's not pretty. People who proclaim themselves to be doing the work of spirit, and you can feel it's egoic. It's self-centered. It's not lifting up the whole. Dangerous. And so we don't want to lose this I-thou relationship with God. But we don't want to back away from the I. I love the song where it said, "You're my shelter in the storm." That would be more of the I, thou, the I and you, that God, you are my shelter in the storm. But what we're teaching today in affirmative prayer is that you get to stand as Jesus did on the deck of the boat and say, peace, be still to the storm. That power is in you to proclaim your truth and to see the demonstrated result of that knowing into your experience. Does that feel good? That's what we're about today. In the early days of metaphysics in New Thought, metaphysics goes way before New Thought, but we are a metaphysical tradition. Many of the earlier teachers in New Thought, they coined the term treatment, spiritual mind treatment, or just mind treatment, as a way of kind of differentiating our affirmative prayer from the other types. And the way that they use that word, it's a little odd sounding. I kind of spiritually grew up from my 20s to my 40s in a religious science community, and they use the word spiritual mind treatment. I thought, what the heck is that? This is weird. But it was explained to me that if you have something wrong in your body, you're going to seek out the correct treatment to remedy it, aren't you? If the bone is broken, you set it, you isolate it in a cast or a splint, that's how it heals. It's the same thing. If something is off in your consciousness, if you've forgotten God's presence in your life in any area, you need a remedy, you need a treatment. And that's what affirmative prayer is. We call the quality of God that is apparently missing, we call it into reality, we name it, we claim it, and we experience it. That's the treatment. Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of religious science, also known as Science of Mind, and now called the Centers for Spiritual Living, he did a wonderful daily meditation book with Raymond Charles Barker, another minister in that movement, and it's called Richer Living, and I have been using it pretty much every day for, 20 years. My physical copy is just dog-eared and shredded and with highlights all over it. But I now look at it on Kindle, and it's still just, is it possible to dog-ear a Kindle book? Mine would be. Lots of highlights. But this was from this week, June 5th. I want you just to feel this. This is the knowing. This is the consciousness I'm speaking of today. This is Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles Barker. My word is power. My thought is a direction to the universal power and presence. My active treatment is a command to the subconscious to produce what I want. Knowing what I really want, I now speak with authority to my own mind, and the sum total powers of the universe automatically produces my command into form. This is my power and my authority as a child of God. Jesus bid the waves be still, and they calmed at his word. I now look upon the troubles of my own experience, and I declare, peace, be still. Jesus demonstrated to all that God's power is the only power. I am a center of this power, and it seeks my recognition and direction. My thought directs it, and my emotions motivate it. See, I believe this particular spiritual practice called affirmative prayer is the perfect balance of heart and mind. Holmes said, my thoughts direct it, my emotions motivate it. That's what I want to speak about today. Mind and heart in unison, aligned with truth, changes and heals our lives. There may be part of you right now that's going, who do you think you are to stand on the deck of your own life and say, peace, be still? I'll tell you who you are. You're not that voice. The voice that says, who do you think you are? That's the ego. The ego is not just the one that tries to pump you up and make you aggrandize. The ego is also one that tries to keep you in your place. The ego is always ascribing qualities of better or worse, competition in the world. The God voice within you, that Christ mind that we speak of, so what I'm talking about today, that where we are one with this infinite power, it is quiet and graceful and yet bold and powerful. This is true humility. Humility is not being humiliated and being less than anything. Humility means being right-sized. And this is the place we speak of, in heart and mind, to claim our good boldly and faithfully and gracefully. Heart and mind. Let's start with mind. Why do we need the mind to do this work? Because it's your mind that's thinking the wrong thoughts. Somebody asked me, well, I've said this a lot. They told me when I first got to a New Thought church, if you want to know what you're thinking, look at your life. And my life didn't work. And it was so much more convenient to blame my childhood or the economy or the culture. It's so much more convenient. But I was told that my pain and my possibility and my potential are all in that sense of responsibility. My thoughts are creating my reality. And so if I've created the stuff I don't want, I can use the same mind. Actually, no, you can't. Einstein said that. You can't. The mind that created the problem cannot create the solution. I have to change my mind. I have to transform my mind. I have to elevate my mind into the truer knowing that I know, and then I can begin to create a different experience of my life. So what do you want? That's a big part of this conversation today. As I said, if you break a limb, you know what's wanted. You need to set the limb and isolate it in some way. If something isn't working in your life, it's telling you what the need is. You see, we could just do a prayer that, God, give me everything. There's a certain lack of specificity there, you know? That there is a quality that the mind is able to direct the form of the prayer in a particular way. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 19, now the Lord God formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds of the sky, and he brought them to the man, and the man is universal. That's what it's representing, men and womankind, all people. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds and the sky, and all the wild animals. Well, what does that have to do with anything? The metaphysical power of naming. From the ground, which represents the void, the unformed nature of God energy that is just like Play-Doh, waiting to be shaped and given a certain direction. From the ground, God brought forth all these forms, and then it was humanity that named them. God gave the power of naming to who? To us. That the name has power, it has a specific purpose. In the ancient traditions, still practiced today, and many of the indigenous people, they talked about the medicine of each of the animals. That you could call in the qualities of buffalo into your experience if that was what was needed. You could call in the experience of mockingbird is one that I use. Mockingbird speaks the truth in the language of the hearer. When I have something to say to someone and they may not want to hear it, I call in mockingbird energy. John loves dolphin energy. It's all about play and joy. And that's a great way to understand that we don't need, it doesn't do us any good to do this spiritual mind treatment, this affirmation prayer for just everything fixed. No, it's being asked for. We have to know in specific ways. We call upon specific qualities of God that are apparently not here, and then they come forward from within us when we know it. What are the qualities of the infinite? They are infinite. But it's good to start with a list. I always go back to Thomas Troward, one of the early New Thought writers in the 1800s. And he said that there are 7 primal qualities of God. They are life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy. And these qualities will seek to reveal themselves in our lives. And any place where we're not in alignment with the truth, there will be something missing, something off. And you are given the power and the invitation to name your good. This is the power of the mind in affirmative prayer. You can name it specifically. You can call it forward into your experience. So the heart, why do we need the heart? What is the heart? What I mean by the heart is the feeling nature that we possess. Ernest Holmes said that the mind directs, or the thought directs, and the emotion motivates. Another place in Scripture says, the effectual and fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. The effectual part is, I'm going to be specific in a way that I know is needed. That's the mind. And fervent, the emotion, the feeling of it. I call the heart into this prayer. And you know, I sometimes get criticized for my emotionality, but I do not apologize for it. It is my power. Thank you. It is the way I access the power of God. It moves something in me. And in my prayers, it really works. I do laugh and I do cry when I'm praying at times, when I feel it. It's sometimes, John and I were talking about this, we've been praying together for years now, and that there'll be a certain phrase that my heart might call for, and as I speak those words, it's somehow like it drops in and blooms. My feelings expand. That's what we're talking about, to invite this emotion into our prayer. And I grew up Pentecostal. We know about that. Yeah, Missionary Baptist knows about that too. There's some emotion in those prayers. There's power in that. We don't want to negate it. And here, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but just to yourselves, do you consider yourself to be more of a clear thinker, logical person, or more of an emotional person? Well, if you chose clear thinker, logical person, you're lying. At least when it comes to making choices. Science has proven this. The people who've been brain damaged and cannot access the emotional centers of their brain, they cannot make a decision. All decisions have an emotional component. You can't decide unless you want it to be a certain way. And that desire, that's what I want to talk about for the heart. What does your heart desire? What do you want? What wants to happen in your life? How would you be made free? Last week we talked about, would you be made whole? That was 2 weeks ago. Would you experience wholeness? What do you want? Emily Cady says that your desire is God tapping at the door of your mind, seeking to give you your next greater good. What do you want? Those who dwell in the presence of the Lord are given the desires of their heart. This is from Psalm 37. That something is built into the very fabric of reality, that this unrealized, undifferentiated formlessness of God wants to be poured forth into your life as freedom and fulfillment. It wants to. And it's asking for your cooperation in mind and heart. What is it? How do you get the heart involved? Just right now, I just invite you to place your hand over your own heart. Close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath. And just be with this question, what do I want? What do I want? And just see for a moment if anything arises. What do I want? You can open your eyes. It's a powerful practice. How long ago was it now? 2008. So this would have been 11 years ago. I was finishing up seminary. I'd been involved in my community there in Dallas as its music director and a practitioner for many years. And I loved that community. They healed me. But something I knew was calling me to a greater experience. But I was resisting it because that was home. Those were my people. And so I kept feeling like this tightness, this constriction. And it was showing up as conflict. A lot of today's talk is coming from Reverend Petra Weldis, who is the senior minister, co-minister at CSL Dallas, and she is still my partner, prayer partner, and beloved friend and teacher. But at the time, we were kind of knocking heads. Our relationship was, and it was just me. It was just I was outgrowing that chapter, and I didn't know how to say that. So I called a mentor who knew us both, and I said, "Help me here." And she said, "Well, it's not about her. I'm going to ask you just to be with one question for the next 6 months. What do I want?" And out of that came two things. I want the opportunity to do ministry full-time, and I want a slower tempo in my life. And that was enough direction for me to see some choices that could be made. I did my spiritual mind treatment. I did my prayer. Choices were made from the heart and the mind, and here I am. It brought me here. Eventually, it brought me here. I have an image I'd like to share with you. I found this morning because I wanted to talk about this. Do you know what this is? It's a nautilus. Cross-section of a nautilus shell. So in the very center, you see there that first little triangular chamber. That's where that animal lived in the beginning. It was the perfect protective home. He created it. She created it out of its own body that's protective. Then something happened as the animal grew. It was tight and constraining, and so it created a new chamber, and it moved into that one. And you can see this beautiful, this is mathematics in nature. This is the Fibonacci sequence. The golden ratio revealed right here. If you don't think that there is some intelligence native in this universe, I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know. You can see it, the beauty here. Well, this is us as well. That we get into a particular pattern of life, of work, of relationship, of understanding, and it gets tight. You see, sometimes your heart will speak to you about what it wants from joy, and sometimes it will speak from pain. And we must listen. And we must listen. I invite you to begin to practice this. We teach classes on it. There are books on it. It's really fabulous work. It is my primary spiritual practice still. If something is missing or off in my life, I go to prayer. I ask my heart what is needed, and I find the words to claim it in my good. And it always brings me to that next chapter. I'm going to close today by, if somebody would ask me what I wanted now, well, I was reminded that maybe that slow tempo thing has worn off. I want to think about that. But because my church in Dallas did not have a full-time position for me, so I finished seminary and I knew I wanted to do ministry full-time, and that was the exit and the entry. And then I got here, and I didn't think I wanted to do pastor work. I just thought, I'll do my music thing, I'll go travel, I'll be a part of a community. But it became apparent that this was in my heart, that was my desire to lead a community, and specifically to lead this community. But that wasn't up to me. But I got clear that I wanted something more. And my first year here, I had an interview or a performance assessment with Howard, my former senior minister. And I just got clear, and I said, Howard, I want to tell you that if there's not a bigger role for me here, then I'll give you 2 more years and in full joy, but then I'll be leaving because I know that something greater is calling to me. And he said, what do you think about my job? And I was convinced he didn't see me as a possible successor, and the tears came, and I said I would be honored. And he said, well, I don't know yet, and I don't have a plan yet, but you'll be on the list. Sometimes we have to be able to say what's real for us, because I would have been willing to leave if there was not a larger role for me here. We can't get attached to form. So I wasn't going to talk about that. We got to wrap up here. I became senior minister in, when was it? It was right after Harvey, September 2nd of 2017, coming up on 2 years. And the church was, we had over 100 individuals and families that were flooded. There's a lot of chaos. And then as we kind of handled that and we did what we could do to support, I was like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And it's like, I want to grow this church. And that's probably the phrasing I would use. But let me say this differently now. I want this church to grow. And that voice came in. It's like, who do you think you are? That voice? Because really, I will tell you that part of that was my ego. I love to be seen as successful. I like having people see my achievement. That's in there. That's a part of me. I'm going to own it right here in front of you. And so I pushed that aside. I wouldn't speak about wanting this church to grow because I thought it was my ego, but it kept coming. I want this church to grow. I want it to grow because what we have is too good. And this, right past the 1-year mark last fall, I did some deep work and I got some good counsel. And what came forward is that this desire within me as your leader to want this church to grow is good because we can do so much more with more. And so next month, Miss Jackie Lyles, stand up, Jackie, let us see you. I love this woman. We are partnering with her company and we are creating a strategy for growth. Growth. We want to grow. And that's going to take all of us. And I will tell you that desire in me, my heart is so full of it. Yeah, I'm full of it. My heart is so full. Because I know that what we can do is so much greater than that which we have done. I'm asking for your support, and I'm asking for your contribution. I'm asking for your commitment and your engagement in this process. And tell your friends, invite them. There's something happening here. All month long, we're going to give you tools. I know today was not really a tool. It's more of a philosophical understanding. In 2 weeks, next week, Reverend Sheila, where is she? Sheila Gautreau is going to be speaking about, on Father's Day, about how we use spiritual service, sacred service as a spiritual practice. And in 2 weeks, I'm talking about affirmations and denial. That'll be nuts and bolts, how you can put this into action in your life. Something is happening. You're amazing. If no one has told you they love you today, I love you. God bless you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.